Good evening, and welcome to our third session of Conversations from the Capitol. This session is really aimed at highlighting American Ismailis aimed at who are working within the city, state, and federal politics and policy. My name is Zach Karim, and I'm a member of the Northeast Council, Ismaili Council for Northeast, as member for Communications and Publications. Tonight, we are honored to host Ambassador Sada Cumber. Ambassador Cumber was the first appointed U.S. Special Envoy to the Organization of the Islamic Conference, OIC, in 2008 with the mandate to improve dialogue between the U.S. and the Muslim world. As Special Envoy, Ambassador Cumber traveled to over 40 Muslim countries to advance key areas of U.S. policy. Our moderator tonight is Jamil Jaffer. Jamil is founder and executive director, National Security Institute, George Mason University School of Law. I know you will enjoy hearing all the experiences Ambassador Cumber will share with us tonight. As a reminder, if you do have questions, please use the question and answer function in Zoom. As well as a suggestion, we recommend that you view this webinar in gallery mode versus speaker mode. Thank you, and now I will turn it over to Jamil.
Awesome, thanks Zach, and thanks to the National Council for sponsoring this session, the Communications and Publications portfolio in particular. And thank you so much to Ambassador Sada Cumber for joining us. It's an honor to be with the ambassador today. I know that we're just getting his camera started and audio started, so we'll give him a second to get that up and running. In the meantime, I want to talk a little bit about the ambassador's experience. Some of the things you might not know about Ambassador Cumber. There you are, Ambassador Cumber. He was the first ever special envoy to the Organization of the Islamic Conference. So before we get started, though, I want to note, Ambassador Cumber, you've served in a variety of amazing positions. We've heard your biography, your short biography just now. We know that you're not speaking today. You're speaking only in your personal capacity, not for any prior people you worked for or institutions that you worked for. You're just in your personal capacity. Is that right?
Correct.
Awesome. Well, listen, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. You know, over the last couple of weeks, we've had other speakers, Amira Valiani, who worked on national security issues in the White House under President Obama. We had Sophia Lalani, I believe your daughter-in-law, who currently works on similar issues for Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey. Now, given that you led America's foreign policy relationship with the Organization of Islamic Conference, a organization made up of 62 member and observer nations, let me start with sort of our standard go-to question, right? If you could tell us, like, if you could pick one moment in your long career, particularly though while you were serving as the special envoy, without getting any classified material, what was that? I can't believe I'm in the room for this discussion. What was that moment for you in your long storied career?
Well, thank you, Jamil. But let me take a moment to thank you for moderating this webinar. And I also wanted to thank CNP leadership for inviting me to be their guest tonight. Speaking of a wow moment, I think you are taking me back into memory lane, because, but let's begin that with my visit to the White House, you know, because if you see the image here, our family going for holidays in 1983, and we're standing outside the fences of White House. Rabia, Ali, my wife Mumtaz, and myself. And then you see the bottom one, exactly 25 years it took. And at some point in time, the other day, somebody was asking me, how can an ordinary person immigrating from Pakistan can get into this? And
going from being outside the fence to being not just inside the fence, but in the Oval Office.
In the Oval Office, right. And it was very surreal experience, because I was invited to come to the White House, and I don't remember the date, but it was 10:30 in the morning. and the gates open. I think I was pre-cleared, so the gates open, and as soon as the car parked, this military uniform, very handsome man greeted me and opened the door to the West Wing, and I was led from there into the waiting area where he says that you will go into the Oval Office. So I thought there must be another layers of rooms that you have to cross, and people would be greeting you and asking you whatever, and you will end up somehow in the Oval Office. Well, that didn't happen. And I realized at that time, sitting there, my shoelace was coming apart. So I bent down to tighten my shoe, and somebody was walking towards me. And I was like, okay, somebody, it's the next step now.
The assistant to the assistant to the assistant to the assistant.
Exactly.
Right.
You know? So I look up, and the president is right in my face.
George Bush.
George Bush. And he says, how are you, buddy? And how's Austin? And who's running your business? And I said, I have an able wife. And he says, yes, I know that. So let's come in. So he put, if you see an image on the top right, he put his hand on my shoulder and walked me in. And as soon as I got in, I see Stephen Hadley there, the National Security Advisor. I see John Negroponte, the Deputy Secretary of State. And John turned around and he said, oh, Sada, I just told President that and he comes from Greek heritage.
Right.
So he said, I just told President, I said, the first generation immigrants, we always run into issues. But I just told President that, Sada, in your background check, you came out squeaky clean. And I was like, At that moment, it hits you that if you are asked, your faith asks you to apply proper ethics in your life,
right?
You hear this kind of comments that you came out squeaky clean.
Yeah. Anyway, this is the reason. This is it. This is why. This is the moment why you did all those things right
to get there. So then he, of course, he introduced me to everyone. Juan Zarate was there, Elliot Ibrahim Abram was there, and then there were other couple of people. So he introduced me, and then he showed me a portrait of Abraham Lincoln. And he says, every president who comes to the White House, he has a choice to pick a image of president, a portrait, and hang there. And you, Jameen, are aware of that. So he said, I picked up, President Lincoln's image. Now, behind those two chairs, you see, it is always George Washington. That's permanent. Right. But on the side, you have the image. So I said to him,
he gets to pick one.
He has to pick one.
Right.
So I said, why didn't you pick your dad's picture? And he says, oh, I wanted to go back into the history. And when you are looking at legacies, you have to go back in the history. And my father has just served. So I said, oh, okay. So then he moved and he showed me the desk, and he says, this is the desk I use, which is Ronald Reagan used that desk. I'm using the same desk. And then we were getting comfortable, and we sat down, and so he said, are they paying you any salary? And I said, President, this would be the first time in my life that somebody would be writing a paycheck for me.
Wow.
Because my dad, when I was leaving Karachi, he said, son, to be successful, especially in America, when payday comes, make sure your signature is on the front of the check, not on the back of the check.
Right. It's good advice.
Yeah. So I told President, I said, President, this is the first time you'll be writing in the front of this signature, and I'll be having the back signature. So we joked about it. And then suddenly, and I was not prepared for that, nobody mentioned to me that guess what's going to happen? The gates, the doors on the east side of the Oval Office, they just open, and there's a huge gush of media. They just come, and they're totally covered in front of you and start ambushing you with questions and
the press spray, as they call it.
Press corps, I think, whatever is said. And they just came in huge, and I was kind of taken back. So I kind of put myself in the back of the seat So I can probably, they're taking pictures like crazy, clicking.
Right.
Cameras were clicking like, and you have never seen that. And of course, we had the short conversation, and then they are pushed back.
Right.
And they are let out, and then they are told that after this event, ambassadors will be coming out and he'll be talking to you all. Well,
Right.
nobody had told me that either.
So you've got no speech.
No speech, and I'm just walking in. So when I walked out,
Right.
but he says, "What's your mandate?" And I'm like, "I don't know."
Oh,
So I made up, actually.
is that right?
Yeah, I made it up, and
Love it.
I started having conversations with them, because before that, if you see my background, I've served in
Yeah.
Texas in different boards.
Yeah.
And
So let's talk about that. So you mentioned you came from Karachi, right?
Correct.
So let's step back. You said it's got to be an amazing story. So let's go back to the beginning. So you're born in Karachi, right? You go to school there. You get your bachelor's degree, right, in what, commerce, right, and
Correct.
a master's degree in history.
Yes.
And then you come to the U.S., right?
Yes.
And so how do you get from a master's degree in Karachi to the U.S., become a U.S. citizen, and then end up in the White House? Like, give us that journey, because I mean, a lot of our families, a lot of our parents were first generation in this country. Some of the folks on the phone, we've got almost 250 people on the phone, by far the biggest turnout we've gotten thus far. I'm sure all these people are thinking, so I did that. My parents did that. How did this guy get in the White House, the president, having a conversation where, by the way, clearly he already knew you and knew your business, knew your wife. Clearly John Negroponte knew you. Like, how does that happen to somebody who came from Karachi? And, I don't get it. Tell us the story.
Great. So before I begin, can I end my first story?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I got you.
So later, President Bush is sharing with us a story, saying that they had his wife and him, the first lady and him, had friends in Midland, Texas, because he lived there. So this couple would be writing them letters and sending them gifts. So they decided one day we're going to invite them and put them in the East Wing and show them the movie, have dinner. The next day, give them tour, and they will be happy. So he said, they came into the Oval Office, and at the Oval Office, he was still telling me that story later. And he said they came in, and after the dinner and movies and everything, next day morning, he said, I brought in, and somehow I was giving them the tour, and the phone rang. So he said, I went to pick a phone and sat on my desk. And he says, I'm talking, and I'm turning around, and I'm looking at this couple, and they are whispering, and they're looking at me. And he said, at that moment, I felt they're probably saying, how did this man get into this chair?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of America.
Yeah.
Now you take me back and ask me the same thing that you. So a person, if you aspire and really stay focused, and you keep working on it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you one thing, I'm a dreamer. I dream 24/7. I can see myself in certain situations. So coming from US into Austin, Texas, by the way, and in Austin, the first lady at that time, President Bush, was governor of Texas. Mm-hmm. So she would bring her 35 millimeter film for processing at my photo labs.
Sorry. I just want to be clear. You had a photo development shop. Kids today now don't understand this, right? You used to have film in your phone, in your cameras, and people would bring it in and you'd process it. So you ran a photo shop, to be clear.
Correct. A photo
and
lab.
The first lady brought a lab. She brought you her film to be developed.
Correct.
That's how you got to the first lady.
Yeah. So I started with one, and then I had 7 labs in Austin.
Yeah.
And so then, of course, by that time, I was introduced to Lieutenant Governor Rick Perry at that time. And he, as you know, served as the longest serving governor of the state of Texas, and then came to Washington to be the Secretary of Energy in this.
Just recently, right? Yeah.
So we, and guess what? It's the same way. He used to bring their film processing also.
Pretty good Photoshop.
Pretty Photoshop. Now, with all of this happening, and at that time, I believe I was also appointed to serve as a honorary consul general for the government of Malta. I don't know about that. You know about that or not?
Interesting.
So I had some experience in dealing on policy issues.
Right.
So,
Diplomacy.
and then guess what happens with the networking?
Whatever.
I am in my prayer house in Jamaat Khana, and we had about 100 or more students coming from foreign countries.
Right.
And for some reason, my mom and my wife and I were kind of a host family.
Yeah.
So one young lady comes to me and says, Sada uncle, my professor, Dr. John Butler, who's the head of the Department of Sociology, he is an entrepreneurial class and he invites people to speak.
Yeah.
And would you like to come? Can I recommend your name? And I said, sure. So I ended up in his class. And he then had a conference on minority in America.
Right.
He's from Louisiana, very interesting
Yeah.
person. So he invited George Bush as a governor to be the keynote speaker. So that's where we met. And after that, we are in San Antonio, Texas.
So just real quick. So at the time you met Governor Bush, did he know that his wife was, or did you guys discuss the fact that his wife brought their
Yes.
film to your lab? Okay, so you had that conversation with him. Okay.
Yes. And
Yeah.
you know, you have those. The first conversation was who you are, what you represent,
Right.
what you do, and
Right.
just you know, if the first lady comes and all of that.
Yeah. Grip and grin. Shake the hand and move on.
Correct. So this young lady says she invited me, and the next I see in the conference, I'm also speaking, and Governor Bush is a keynote speaker. So he meets me there, and the next time I see him is in San Antonio.
Okay.
And he is, I think he came to open his veteran hospital or something. And he came on Air Force One. And he met
Oh, so
me.
by this point he's the president. Now he's the president.
Now he's the president.
Okay.
So he is basically saying to me, he said, listen, Sada, I offered you earlier to go as an ambassador, and you said that you were not interested in bilateral relationship. You need to be involved in multilateral because I'll get bored. And
That's what you told him? You said no?
I said, no, because I'm too young. I mean, it's after 70, if you give me, I'll go on your paycheck and enjoy 3 years in the country.
Right.
But otherwise, I'll get bored. So
Okay.
he said, you remember you told me you wanted multilateral position? Well, guess what I have? I have something for you to represent US and the Islamic world, and it's OIC. And I said, what's OIC?
Yeah.
And that's the evening after he took his plane back to Air Force One, back to Washington, I drove and Googled the first time what was OIC.
So you didn't know at the time this thing he'd offered you, no idea what it was.
No.
So tell us, what is the OIC? I know it's the 62 countries. What is it?
So OIC is a non-governmental organization, and the largest we have is the UN with 190 members.
Right.
The second largest is OIC with 7 members plus some observers.
Yeah.
And the third largest is the Commonwealth Conference with 42 members.
The former British colonies.
British colonies.
Yeah.
So that's the third largest non-government. So this was a very good position. And of course, by the time I got involved and approved and everything else happened, I got security clearance, which was over top secret.
Right, SCI, right.
Vice presidential level. So you have access to SCIF room. And this position also allows you to have access to the top level leadership of all the government agencies.
Right.
So
the ability to be in close proximity to the president. Right.
So, and that kind of worked, and it just kept on and on. But what I'm saying to you is that, you know, there is it's networking, relationships, learning, and moving forward.
Yeah.
If you keep on that course, there's always a path forward strategy, and you follow that, and you get it.
So let's talk about some of the other times that you sort of had a role in the government. So you're a special envoy, right? And the OIC is the Organization of Islamic Countries. So there's these 57 countries plus 5 observers, right? 62 countries total. And in this process, you traveled over 42 Muslim countries, right? You played a key role at one point in the aftermath of 9/11, and you're working in the Bush administration, representing the US government to the entire Muslim world. And you played a key role in getting their leadership to publicly condemn terrorism and suicide bombing. Can you tell us about how you were able to sort of convey the US government's view and convince this large organization of a diverse number of people, a diverse set of countries, to sort of make this statement that they had never made before? How did that happen?
So I quickly learned that relationships, either bilateral or multilateral, there are trades-off.
So you mean between one country and another, or one country and many countries?
To many countries and
Right.
one country to other.
Right. Okay.
These are bilateral relationships, and they are always what you call equal exchange of assets.
Okay.
So they are always asking of you that there are certain areas where we need it. If you go to the State Department, you will see that there are regions where you have a head is the head for, say, the Assistant Secretary of State for South Asia or
Right.
Central Asia, and they run that region.
Right.
They go to the undersecretary, and then undersecretary, you go to the 2 deputy, and then you on top of that is the Secretary of State.
Right.
So they have these kind of what we call parking lots, where you have the ask of what their needs are. And then you have your needs, so you go there and you negotiate and see if there's an opportunity to exchange equal assets. So you get what you want and they get what they want. We call it carrying those packets.
Right.
So now the US, of course, as you said, was a need that the OIC need to condemn terrorism, but the OIC also had a very big need, because at that time there was so much noise in the media that nobody could sort out what is the official position of the US government. How are they reaching out to the Muslim world?
Okay.
Or OIC?
Right.
No, because there was so much noise.
Right.
What would happen is that then OIC really wanted to reach out to US and says, how do we stop using Islam name in a negative way?
Right.
And that's the reason, President Bush immediately after 9/11 went to the mosque.
Yes.
In
Yes.
Washington. He visited that mosque to make sure he gives that message.
Right.
Jamil, it got to a point that it was becoming so difficult.
Yeah.
So much noise. There was on both sides. We talk about clash of civilization, and normally in our faith leadership, we call it faith of clash of ignorance.
Yeah.
And it was from both sides. Nobody had blame for that. So what was happening at that point is that my office decided that we need to bring the leadership of the Muslim world on a very private level. In fact, we were doing this after dark and having one-on-one meetings so they can meet with the leadership of America. And the American leadership was directly telling them that US is not at war with Islam.
Right.
And that was very, very, very important. So we were able to do that. And I think quite a few, it was not just the leadership of the government there, but even non-government, civil society leadership.
Right.
The influence, people who have a lot of, representation in those countries.
Yeah.
Including some of the ulamas of the Muslim world from Egypt,
Right.
Tunisia, from Pakistan.
Encouraging these governments to do this.
Yes, our government, we started bringing them, and they were sponsoring them. And when they arrive for 3 or 4 days, we will arrange meetings for them directly hear from the horse's mouth. Because the media was all over. That was impossible to manage.
Right.
So that kind of worked out in a way very well for me, because I was able to bring this, and that brought some calmness, some stability. So we were able then to sit on a table and have a conversation rather than dealing with the noise.
That makes sense. So, and I want to mention to the audience again that we will be taking questions in about 10 minutes or so, 10, 12 minutes. So if you want, just please put your questions in. We'll get to as many of them as we can. So let's talk about another moment, because I think you mentioned to me when I've talked to you before that you had the chance to meet the King of Saudi Arabia, which is pretty cool, right? He's a king. It's a neat thing. But you also told me that you had a chance to work with both him and Pope Benedict on something. What can you tell us about, again, without getting anything classified, what can you tell us about what you did with the king and with Pope Benedict?
So that was very interesting situation, because President Bush had arranged a meeting that the Saudi king will go and meet with His Holiness at the Vatican. Because at that point, you remember that 15 out of 19 terrorists who did damage to our assets in America were from
Right.
Saudi Arabia, 15
Right. On 9/11, right? Yeah.
9/11. So Saudi Arabia was looking to present a softer face. So the idea was that if the Vatican, as a Catholic Church leadership,
Right.
and the King of Saudi Arabia having these, the Holy Mosque and the Kaaba there, if they can somehow have a dialogue between them on the interfaith level,
Yeah.
and it would probably create some better image. Now,
Right.
both the Vatican and the Saudis had need, because the Vatican wanted to make sure that they have visibility when you have Catholics in the Muslim world. They want some kind of protection,
right.
and the government's assurances.
Interesting.
Now, what happens is the word assurance is seen in other culture as a promise. So President Bush sent me a note saying, why don't you go and meet both parties and see if you can mitigate this issues.
I mean, it's pretty cool, right? The president sends you a note, hey, please go meet the king and the Pope. That's not a bad day of work.
No,
days of work.
Yeah, and so of course I was shuttling between these two countries, and right. I met His Holiness twice, and King Abdullah once, because we were also trying to make sure that at some point in time we can mitigate that. But when I got there, and I realized when I was hearing, there were a couple of issues that I felt as a Muslim, having a worldview, that the representation of Muslim world, it was lacking, because there was no Shia voice. It was only Sunni voice.
Right. And right. And the king, you mean by the king of Saudi Arabia, you mean?
Correct.
Right.
So I recommended to the Vatican and to the Saudis that I think if you look at the Shia tradition, they bring reason, intellect, and conciliations kind of mode. Plus, they are influenced by what we call the mystical Islam, which is a Sufi.
Right.
So they believe in relationships more than rituals.
Okay.
That's a very important voice that we need in this dialogue.
To be clear, you're making this point to people in the U.S. government.
Yes, and then
in order to convince them that the Pope should meet with not just the King of Saudi Arabia, but some Shia cleric.
Yeah, and then of course, and then I was very happy to realize that Rafsanjani with his daughter actually went to Jeddah for a round of interfaith dialogue where Shia is also represented. The other thing that I observed in that was that post Crusaders, remember the Crusaders who were out there fighting. And at that time, if you see, the Pope was involved in that, but then after post Crusaders, they moved back.
Right.
And the Catholic Church actually became the moral voice of Catholics, Christians.
Interesting.
And I was realizing that in Islam, we don't have that moral voice, because both theocracies, Iran and Saudi Arabia, were completely involved in politics. And politics is a different play.
Yeah. Right.
You can't have a moral voice. So I was trying to tell them that somewhere along the line, we need to have an institution within Islam where we have a moral voice, just like we have from the Catholic world.
If only you could think of one.
Well,
that's not involved in politics. I wonder, it's so hard to imagine. Anyways, keep going. Yeah.
So that gave me that whole dialogue above and beyond mitigating their issues.
Right.
And it's really looking at the same issue from two different optics.
Right.
And here if you watch Fox and you watch CNN on the same issue with two different optics.
Right.
So that's the way life is.
Yeah.
So the Vatican will see things in one way, same issues, and the Muslim world will look at different ways. So I had to basically put them together and bring some sense. And I'm glad that I was very successful.
Yeah. So, it must have felt like a pretty big weight on your shoulders, right? I mean, here you are. This is the first time the U.S. has had any representation to this group of Muslim countries, the second largest NGO in the globe in terms of nation states. and you're essentially representing this nation to the world's 1.6, 1.8 billion Muslims. Like, what does that mean, and how do you even think about that role? And in particular, how do you think about that role being a Shia, so from a minority within Islam, and then being a Ismaili Muslim Shia, right, from a minority of a minority, and representing a predominantly Judeo-Christian country, right, to the Muslim world? Like, how do you think about that?
So I think I would respond to you in two ways. When the first slide Zach put in, you saw the portrait of our family, and in that,
right, we all have those. Right,
I'm the youngest one, by the way. The baby sitting in the middle at the bottom.
Right,
I'm the one that. Right. So in family, we had the layer of grandma, mother, and father. Yes. Then yes. 3 layers of 3 elder brothers and sister siblings. Another set of 3. And then the 2, and then I. And we had doctors, we have architects, we have biologists, we had accounting people, all of that. So honestly, I have been the most lucky person on this earth because I was nurtured, empowered, I was cultivated, I was harnessed constantly by this whole group of people around me, the family. Yeah. So they lifted my self-esteem. And I always was able to work from this platform of confidence and a lot of wisdom.
Right.
And then you go to the faith, and that constantly tell you that you need to be grounded within the framework of ethics and moral values.
Right.
And I remember one time I was sitting in Jeddah actually with a very high official in Saudi Arabia. And for some reason, I put out a tasbih, which was like a rosary, And I said to this person, I said, I can, with this little tool, with this rosary, I can invoke His grace 24/7, and I can feel His presence. So I think I was put in this, within the family and the faith in such a way that I always felt very, very comfortable in moving into any space, going back and forth. And come out as a person of reason, as I said.
Right.
So I was that way. I was very comfortable, and I was very successful.
Yeah. So we're gonna come back to a lot of these questions because we've got a lot of questions in the queue that I want to get to. But I do have one question for you before we go to the audience questions, and that is, I'm sure there's a lot of people there, the 250 people almost that we have on the phone and on the WebEx, who are wondering, I want to do that, right? We're in a very difficult time in this country. COVID has got us all at home. There are economic challenges here and around the globe. There's obviously social challenges that we're facing with protests and mistreatment of people. How if I want to make a difference, and I'm just the average Ismaili, I either grew up here or I came from Pakistan or I came from Central Asia, from Afghanistan, but I'm like you. I want to make a difference. I want to get to the Oval Office. I want to be at the State Department. I want to be working for Senator Booker in the Senate. How do I make that? Can I really do that? Is that really possible? And if so, clearly you did, so clearly it's possible. But how do I do that? How do I make an impact in my community, in my city, in my state, in my nation? What do I do to get there from here? I'm just sitting at home thinking about this. What do I do?
I think the key word is volunteering. You need to get engaged. You need to show up and get involved. And I have seen people getting involved at every level.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is also that I have learned, not at the very beginning, but at some level, you need to present yourself that you have some voice and you have some opinions, and you are able to present yourself as an authority on quite a few, like 3 or 4 subject matters.
Yeah.
And you write op-eds, you write white papers, you share with them. So when there's a time to pick, they remember that it's Jamil because he has done it all. Now, there are several ways of doing it. If somebody is looking to get into the government on a career basis, then yes, State Department is a great idea. Take a test, written test. After the oral interview test, you are hired and you're sent to an embassy. Yeah. And there you can start stempling visa. That's your first job.
Right.
But after you come back, guess what happens? They give you 3 choices of 3 countries. You pick one. And they even teach you language. I'll tell you a short story. I met an ambassador who was retiring, and I said, "What are you going to do?" Because he said, "I love languages. So I have 35 years, I speak 5 languages." So I said,
Right.
"How are you going to keep them current?" And you know what was his response? "I'm going to move to New York and I'm going to drive a cab."
I love it. I love it. Because all the languages are spoken there.
Exactly. This is
Yeah.
the city where he can speak all the languages
Right.
in his cab.
Pretty
So
cool.
people go for different reasons.
Yeah.
But the only thing I need to emphasize on this issue is that before you walk into any engagement, any opportunity, any chance that you must have an exit strategy.
What do you
Because
mean by that? What do you mean by
you, know,
that?
you come out of a 17 candidates are standing in line to run for president.
Right.
You honestly think they were all thinking about becoming presidents?
I mean, they
Some
all
of
thought
them,
they could, right?
no, some of them are, Giuliani was never there. He wanted to monetize after he comes out.
Ah, okay.
So one wants to be picked up as a vice president.
Yeah.
Others want to be picked up as on the cabinet secretaries.
Yeah.
Some they want to go out and join the academia and write the
Okay.
book. They
Yeah.
all know exactly going in what are they going to do when they come out.
Okay.
I met an ambassador who has served 3 countries in South Asia or Middle East.
Okay.
He retired and he went into depression because he did not have the strategy.
Yeah.
So for every individual that is
Yeah.
going into anything, even if you're going to Washington for 1 year or 2 year assignment, how are you going to come back and what are you going to do? What is your exit strategy? Because if you have your exit strategy going in,
Right.
building on
Makes
those
sense.
issues.
That makes sense.
So and then of course that's one way for the career path. The other path is of course getting political appointments.
Okay.
The other one is to run for state office. In Houston now we have a Smiley running for the state office.
Yeah.
We have a Smiley who's on the city council. So you can get elected and make a difference. So there are many ways you can, but the first thing is that you need to get involved. Remember, Jamil, the person sitting on the top of the mountain was not dropped there.
Right.
There was no helicopter ride for him. He had to climb up. So you have to have a strategy. You need to get involved, and you need to stay laser focused and keep your eyes on the price. And you'll
eyes on the price. Makes sense. All right, so I'm going to turn to audience questions. We got about 18 minutes left, and we've got 22 questions, so we got to go. We got to go quick. Samira Sani asked, "How did your faith inspire your work conducting diplomacy?"
Well, so I was literally born into what you call the Sufi household.
Okay.
A Sufi, for people who are joining us who do not understand, it's a mystical kind of a concept, and where rituals are less important and relationships are more important.
Right.
When I was a kid, on the streets, I would on Thursday night was a holy night in this where I used to come from, and I used to listen to qawwalis, and I used to listen to the ginans and the Arabic prayers and all of that, and that faith and those values, those areas of being in touch and having that divine presence in your heart and soul, and you kind of walk with it and live with it, gave me tremendous courage.
Right.
I never felt that I was alone.
Yeah.
I always felt that I have someone who's going to be with me and who's going to carry through, and that was my faith.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, faith is very, very important. It gives you confidence.
Yeah. So speaking of faith and this confidence it gives you, Amrit Sonawala asks, first, she thanks you for sharing your experiences. She says she wants to know about the conflicts you face, so these moral issues, right, between your personal beliefs and principles on one hand and representing U.S. interests on the other. Did you ever run into those conflicts? And if you did, and we don't necessarily need to get into the details, but how did you resolve any moral issues you had about the U.S. position and your personal beliefs and principles?
So one time I was asked to represent a U.S. in the second level position at the United Nations in New York.
Okay. Pretty cool.
And I realized how contaminated that environment was when you come to a group of countries. And I, in actuality, I felt that was not the the place that I want to be, because I was not ready to read a statement which would compromise my own conscience and my own faith principles. And
Okay.
I declined. But
Wait,
wherever,
you declined the job.
yes, I declined the
Wow.
job because that was not what I was designed and I was not prepared to do.
Was it a particular statement that made you do that, or was it the fact that you had to sort of take a prepared position? You didn't have any agency, as it were.
So let me be blunt.
Yeah, and you don't have to get into details if you don't want to.
The United Nations is in New York and is in Geneva.
Right.
If you go to Geneva, you have a very strong voice of the Muslim world.
Okay.
You come to New York, they're completely marginalized and compromised. Because there are so many special interests and lobbyists pushing their own agendas.
Right.
They were almost forced to make a statement which you are not comfortable.
Interesting.
I said, no, I'm not going to do it.
Got it. So, so let's see. Our next question is, so Vikram Chawan asks, what do you suggest that youth who are interested in politics and diplomacy do to position themselves for success now?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, what would you suggest to youth? So there are a lot of youth on the line today who are interested in politics and diplomacy. What do they do now, as young people, to position themselves for success?
I'm going to take it on a lighter side.
Yeah.
If you're a very rich person and you have resources, there was a time when to get an ambassadorship was costing you only $100,000.
Donated money.
Today, it's $1 million.
So let's say you can't do that. Let's say you're not in the business of doing that. Well, how do you, if you want to be successful, what do you do?
Well, then I think, then I would really honestly say from today, take a position on 2 or 3 very, very important matters.
Yeah.
And become an expert domain.
Okay.
And push yourself into positions where you are asked to come and make presentations.
Yeah.
Policy papers.
Yeah.
Write down. And I tell you what, you'll be very surprised that it's not just the think tanks that get invited.
Okay.
It will be people like Vic who will get invited. If 3 people are reading it, they will be invited and says, present this paper to us. And it's just like what happened to me in Austin. I was invited at a conference where I met George Bush, and just look where it ended up. So position yourself, launch yourself, state yourself in such a way that you show them the value proposition that you bring for a subject matter. And which is so unique and so deeply, you basically have to carry, heavy lifting on that.
Right.
And there is an opportunity. Don't ever think that they're not looking for you. They are. It's just that, are you ready to get into their face? And that's what it is.
Interesting. That's interesting. I don't think most people would think about that. It's really important, interesting point. So Zara Aladina asks, did you get a chance, and you're travel to 42 Muslim countries, you're talking to the President of the United States. Did you get a chance to share with any of these people that you're in Ismaili? And did you feel like you were able to sort of represent the Ismaili Tariqa or the AKDN, were you able to talk about your faith at that granular level and represent sort of our community to these people? So how did that work?
It's fascinating to know that everyone who wants to visit with you at this level of ambassadorship, they have read your bio. They know exactly who you are and what you represent.
Okay.
I'll give you 2 stories. I was sitting with a foreign minister in a Middle Eastern country.
Yeah.
And he had this beautiful box, which is right in my office. And he had a National Geography way back because his father used to collect.
Okay.
And he looked at me and he said, Ambassador, I have a gift for you. And I said, what is it? He said, it's a National Geography going many, many years back. There are 7 pages of His Highness the Aga Khan's grandfather, Jubilee.
That's pretty cool.
And they're color photographs. That was the first time they were printed in National Geographic colors. And I want you to have this. Another time, I'm sitting with another foreign minister who says, I went to see my mother, and my mother gave me this watch that I thought I should give it to you because you will preserve it and you will cherish it and you will have more value for it. And I took that watch and looked at the back, and there was a seal of the Imamate crescent on it. So
wow.
So the grandfather of Hazrat Imam gave it to his father when he was foreign minister, and I got it. So people,
Pretty cool.
now remember that we represent the moderate version of Islam we practice.
Right.
And we are not secular, but we understand that, and if you look at Quran, it says there is no compulsion in faith.
Right.
He has monopoly on faith either.
Right.
So if you understand and you stay right in those parameters, then you are welcomed everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed that everyone that I would meet, in fact, one of the persons who's one of the most powerful person on this earth,
Yeah.
I walked him and he said, well, your faith leadership has doing so well for the rest of the world.
Hmm.
And I wish people would appreciate it. And by the way, he's a very soft-spoken person. So
Pretty good.
they know exactly
Yeah.
who you are and what you represent.
Yeah. So Syed Ali Momnani asks, did you ever feel rejected by the Muslim community that you talked to, or the Muslim nations, or any of these other ambassadors, because you were a Muslim, but you're representing the United States, and the United States is in the middle of a war on terror, and they're in these Muslim countries, they're invading, and did you feel like you were rejected or ignored or seen as less of a Muslim, or and if you did, how did you address that challenge? Did you ever face that kind of thing?
Well, number one, I was presidential appointment. Number two, I was principal. So I had a black diplomatic passport. Number three, I'm coming back and reporting directly to the president through the 7th floor.
Yeah.
Right?
By the way, you mean the State Department leadership, a black
Yes.
passport, you have a diplomatic passport, and you're a presidential appointee of the United States president, so they've got to respect you.
And I'm principal.
Yeah. You're
So
like the number one guy in the country, or in that area for the United States.
So, and at the level of, at the threshold that I work, these countries know very well that this man is coming from the United States, and we have to deal with them, because look at the value that the United States bring it to them. I mean, I was engaged in the Lebanon and Israeli conflict. Now, everyone understood that America was favoring a country in there. But that does not mean that Lebanon had a choice to go to another country for mitigation, because they knew that America would be the only country that after we get the ceasefire, they will throw so many dollars to build all of our infrastructure. Nobody else can offer you.
Right.
So with that level of, and they know where you fit into the system. And I had never had a single memory where I walked in and I was like, we don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Never.
So there are concerns, today about the way that Muslims are viewed in the United States, and there was early on a alleged Muslim ban, right? Whatever. Do you feel like things have changed in this country's view of Muslims today since your role? And if it has, what can we think about as people of faith who are Muslims to sort of change that perception? Has it changed in your mind, or was it similar back at the beginning of the war on terror and while you were serving in the administration? How did you see that the difference between how Muslims are perceived, and what can we do about it, even if it's the same or different than last time?
Well, I still very strongly feel that challenge is still out there.
Yeah.
Because the beauty in many ways, and also a curse for America, is that once you exercise your Jeffersonian right of one person, one vote,
yeah,
and you have basically sent your leadership to Washington, the first very day a congressman or a senator walks into his or her office, that evening the chief of staff comes and says, what? Sir, ma'am, we have to go for a fundraiser. And right there, the special interest and lobbyists takes you over.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, as Muslim, we are not very, very good at where we are today. And a lot of work needs to be done in that space, because some of the things that other countries, other communities have done. And in America, it is possible to shift the thinking is very much possible in America. You can move to the left or to the right, but it's just that we Muslims still are lacking how to do a good job of that.
Yeah.
It's not that Muslim countries are not wealthy. Remember that 70% of all the natural resources that God has endowed on this earth are controlled by Muslims.
Yeah.
And yet, if you see the GDP of those countries is less than 1 trillion, and ours is 25 trillion alone.
Yeah.
You know, you and I put in $3 trillion a year in IRS. You know?
Yeah.
So it's not that Muslim country is lacking. It's just that we are not united.
Yeah.
And we are too much involved in taking care of ourselves rather than
Right.
people that we lead.
Yeah.
So that challenge is out there, yes.
Yeah. So speaking of sort of U.S.'s policy, well, there's a number of questions we have about, you know, wars that the U.S. has fought over time, about the situation of Uyghur Muslims in China, the situation of Black Americans today in our society. Including, there's a lot of folks there who have a lot of concerns about policy issues. And a lot of what they want to know is, what can they do as individuals living in this country, right? What can they do to talk about those policies? What can they do to get their voice heard? How can they become influential in the way that you were to get some of these concerns heard in the U.S. government and play a role, right? You've talked about, you know, getting involved and writing policy papers. Like, is there other things that people can do? Can they get to the point where they can actually make a difference? Is that possible for people coming from a minority community, from a Muslim community?
Every day, every moment, there are so many opportunities out there. Obviously, they are not going to come and knock on my door or your door. You have to go and knock that door. Nations are not friends. Nations are there for their own interest.
Yeah.
So, you know, people come to me and says, you know, this is happening to this country and we are doing this and you should stop doing that. Well, guess what? We have our own interests. We are not nations. None of the countries are friends to each other. They are all interested in how to protect their own interests. Now, having said that, are we in a position where you or I are sitting, or one of the audiences who's asking the question is sitting, do you have something in you that can make the difference? The answer is absolutely yes. Pull that out of yourself. Honestly, if every one of us has an opportunity right now to come out of these challenges and move forward, look at the history, 100 years of destruction, the human, you know, perseverance. Here we are destroying the world, and here we are building Ubers of the world and Facebooks of the world. And look at the economy where we are taking it. It's humans.
Yeah.
You know, we are very strong. Human race can do wonders. And as individual, every one of us can do it. I mean, honestly, when I landed in America, I was exactly one of the people who was asking these questions. Exactly that. But you stay focused, you keep your eyes on the prize, and you have to bring your value proposition and present. Once they see the value in you, you're in. And that can happen only in America, only in America.
I love it. Ambassador Cumber, I can't thank you enough for being here. Obviously, you've kept the audience really interested. We have over 238 people still with us. I want to remind folks, first, thank you again for coming. Thank you to the council and CMP for hosting us. Next, in 2 weeks from now, we'll have Fatima Sumar on June 18th at 9 p.m. And she served as the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs. So actually the job that you were just talking about,
yes.
We'll have her here with us in 2 weeks from today in the Obama administration. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Ambassador Cumber, once again. It's an inspiring story. And join us again on June 18th. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you for hosting me.